Program Director, distinguished guests, good morning. I'm not the Minister of Energy, as you've heard. Unfortunately, she's stuck in Cape Town on other business, and I've been asked to deputize for her, so I'll do my best. Thank you for inviting me to this prestigious conference. I've had the pleasure of attending the Power Journey in the United States, and we need to congratulate the conference organizers for bringing this conference to Africa for the first time. The World Economic Forum Global Competitiveness Report of 2012-2013 ranks South Africa 52 out of 144 countries, positioning us as the highest ranked country in sub-Saharan Africa and the third placed amongst the BRICS communities. For a developing economy like ourselves, this is quite remarkable given the socio-political and global challenges we've had to overcome over the past few years. The recent downgrading by the rating agencies of our credit rating is unfortunate and a bit misguided. South Africa is a very open investment destination. We have the legal, regulatory, financial, and infrastructural systems in place to make it attractive for investment. Yes, like most countries, we do have socio-political issues to deal with. And I suspect that you have the Marikana incident at the back of your mind. The context of our policy framework needs to be understood against the backdrop of stark contrasts in the level of development, where on the one hand, we have world-class infrastructure, yet we still have some 3.2 million people that don't have access to modern energy carriers. Our investment climate remains a positive one with a massive infrastructure program underway. Investments in water, energy, roads, and transportation are being planned under the leadership of the Presidential Infrastructure Coordinating Committee to the extent of over 2 trillion rands in planned generation capacity alone. This is over the next 18 years. The timing of Power Gen Africa is therefore very expedient. The Integrated Resource Plan, or the IRP as we call it, and the Medium-Term Risk Mitigation Plan propose a supply and demand side initiative or initiatives to address our short to long-term strategy around energy security. When implemented, the IRP will provide enough generation capacity to meet our demand in the future, but it should also meet other objectives that government has set for itself. These objectives include creating job opportunities through the industrialization of various supply chains in power generation programs, upskilling the local workforce, and reducing our energy intensity. Let us put our energy security challenges into perspective. The gap between electricity supply and demand at some recent point was estimated in excess of 19 terawatt hours. And this excludes all the suppressed demand that is unaccounted for. This imbalance and the suppressed demand are constraining economic growth, resulting in potential investments in economic activity being turned off by the lack of adequate power. The problem is a consequence of inadequate investment in generation capacity over the past 20 years, which has now caught up with us. In 2008, this led to widespread load shedding. And Eskom has worked very hard to keep the lights burning under the circumstances. To close this gap, this requires substantial capital investment in new capacity, including alternative and other environmentally benign technologies, like renewable technologies, which tend to be more expensive relative to fossil-based power generation, including coal and gas. The financing of new generation infrastructure has to be borne by South Africans, either as taxpayers or as tariff payers. It is generally accepted that a user charge or tariff is the most economically efficient mechanism for funding new generation capacity. This causes the problem of steeply rising electricity tariffs as new capacity is introduced. Apart from the risk of being inflationary, this causes a situation in terms of economic hardship on the poor unless a special dispensation is put in place for them. The other side of this debate is that without tariff increases, new generation capacity cannot be introduced, and this in turn will result in blackouts which stymie economic growth. The long-term price path for electricity at wholesale level is being developed in a way that strikes a balance between the needs of utilities like Eskom on the one hand and electricity end users on the other. It is important to realize that addressing concerns about the poor is primarily a function of how municipalities determine the tariffs at domestic level. Mechanisms for cushioning the poor, like solar water heaters, inclining block tariffs, and basic service tariffs can be applied. Therefore, this problem should be isolated from the bigger problem of incorrect pricing to the big energy users, who must bear the brunt of the increases and to also cross-subsidize the poor. Generally, this argument gets distorted by concerns around the impact of high electricity tariffs on the poor. Tariffs have to rise to the long-run marginal cost if the industry is to become sustainable and we want to improve energy security. Also increasing energy efficiency to avoid a repeat of the 2008 load shedding. However, if tariffs rise too quickly, this will have adverse impact on the economy. Yesterday, we concluded the signing of agreements to develop some 1,400 megawatts of solar and wind projects in the first window of the Renewable Energy IPP program. 2 windows of procurement have been concluded, with the third round planned for 2013. And subsequently, our aspiration is that a window will be completed every year until we achieve the 18,000 megawatts by 2030 as provided under the Integrated Resource Plan. The Renewable Energy IPP program will introduce 3,725 megawatts of renewable energy in the period up to 2016. The Minister has determined that another 3,200 megawatts of renewable energy technologies is necessary in the period up to 2020. This will hopefully provide the certainty about our commitment to a sustainable and clean energy program. We are very excited that South Africa has begun to seriously explore the possibility of deploying concentrating solar power technologies as an option for augmenting baseload coal in the near future, in a way that will also decarbonize our energy. Whilst the Northern Cape holds the most potential for locating solar parks and has been chosen to host the pilot initiative, preliminary indications are that the solar irradiation levels at most locations in South Africa are better than in Spain, for example. This means that other provinces can also develop solar parks where the development of utility-scale solar plants can be facilitated by preparing the appropriate sites, servicing them, and providing grid access. It is our intention to place South Africa in the top rank of solar power generation so that we can simultaneously create green jobs by localizing the manufacturing, operations, and maintenance. Regulations for new generation capacity were promulgated, making provision for the introduction of independent power producers into the South African market for the first time. In addition, the Independent System and Market Operator, or ISMO, the bill is being deliberated in Parliament for facilitating the development of energy projects by non-Eskom generators, including small distributed generators owned by cooperatives. The lessons garnered from the Renewable Energy IPP program and other IPP programs are very instructive in influencing the amendments being proposed to the Electricity Regulation Act and the National Energy Regulator Act. In addition to the introduction of renewable energy, additional baseload capacity will be constructed after the ministerial determination issued under the provisions of the Electricity Regulation Act, which was recently concurred to by NERSA. Another 5,000 odd megawatts of coal and gas-fired capacity will be developed in the period up to 2020 under an IPP program. The approach to distribution asset management, or the ADAM initiative as we call it, has also been started to address the problems afflicting the distribution sector. A funding model that is tariff-based, for which municipalities already receive an allocation in their tariff, is being sponsored. The ADAM initiative is premised on assisting municipalities to refurbish their infrastructure, subject to them acceding to the regulatory norms and standards that would be imposed by the regulator. Through this initiative, the problems associated with the last mile in the electricity supply service would be addressed. It does not make sense to introduce a massive build program for new capacity, yet leave the distribution problems unattended. Whilst there is recognition that energy efficiency is the cheapest, quickest opportunity or option for balancing our energy supply demand, the relatively low electricity tariff in comparison to the long-run marginal cost of generation does not disincentivize end users, particularly the commercial and domestic sectors, against wastage. The estimate is that about 30% of our generated electricity is wasted. To change this picture, it has become critical to introduce practices that will reduce the demand for electricity as a matter of urgency. This imperative is not driven only by climate change considerations, but the economics of energy efficiency are more favorable than exploiting the supply side options available to us. Energy efficiency interventions in residential areas, commercial buildings, and industrial applications are the best option for us as a country. Such interventions do not only offer the solution to arrest the increase in greenhouse gas emissions, but they are also low cost, quickly deployable, and stimulate job opportunities. The National Energy Efficiency Strategy Action Plan has been consulted with stakeholders to introduce an omnibus of interventions like the awareness campaign that was approved by the social partners at NEDLAC, including business, civil society, and labor, public buildings, solar water heaters, and industrial energy efficiency. Part of the action plan will be funded when the new tariff dispensation kicks in from April next year. We have also installed over 300,000 solar water heater systems to date, with intentions to reach the 1 million target by 2014. Whilst we're happy that we are on track, the majority of these systems, particularly the low pressure type that we install in the low and medium income residential sectors, have been imported and do not result in any energy efficiency impact. This is clearly untenable, and the time has arrived for us to intervene to align the program with government objectives. Funding for the National Solar Water Heater Program has been increased to 4.7 billion rand in the period 2012 to 2014, and this will allow the target to be reached. In addition, the standard offer program for additional solar water heaters in the high domestic consumption segment has been introduced and approved by the regulator. Additional rollout will happen once the new electricity tariff kicks in. Our greenhouse gas emissions profile puts us in the top quartile in the world on a per capita basis. Our commitments at various multilateral platforms, including the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, make it critical for us to start reducing our energy intensity and consequently the emissions. During COP15 in Copenhagen, South Africa committed to reduce our emissions relative to the 1990 levels by 34% by 2020 and 42% by 2025. This means that the reduction must come largely by reducing our utilization of coal for power generation. And the only alternatives are nuclear, imported gas, concentrating solar power, imported hydro, and combinations thereof. Having modeled what is practically possible in the South African energy context in the IRP, it is clear that we will not be able to achieve the emissions profile without completely eliminating coal from our generation mix. If we do eliminate coal, this will destroy many jobs in the sector. It is clear that nuclear has to be introduced with other technologies, including clean energy imports, if the emissions must reduce to the required levels. If we were to replace nuclear with imported gas, the emissions would come down, but would not reduce to required levels. Coal will continue to be an integral part of our energy mix, even in the future. And we will endeavor to research and develop clean coal technologies to deal with the associated greenhouse gas emissions. Carbon capture and storage and underground coal gasification are two technology options we are pursuing vigorously. In conclusion, the global energy sector is facing challenges that are not dissimilar from country to country. Climate change considerations, financing, energy security, and technology options all feature in the decisions that governments have to make about their future energy path. For South Africa, our energy mix will be based on a combination of various technology options, including coal, nuclear, renewable energy, energy efficiency, as we try to strike a balance between cost, mitigating against adverse climate impact, and creating local economic development. I thank you.